Welcome back to another video. Today I'm reviewing Parasyte, the anime adaptation of the manga that everyone was recommended, but not many people read. Like myself. Okay, I read half. Since before the first episode, this was the most hyped anime of its season, but it contains blood and fight, so it really doesn't mean anything. Is Parasyte worth watching? Let's find out. Parasyte is set within modern-day Japan, where a species of aliens fell down to Earth and began incorporating themselves into human society. They embedded themselves into the skin of a person and traveled up to the head, eating it and replacing it, allowing them to have full control of the body. Yeah, sounds kind of believable, but how did they land on Earth? Shouldn't they have just burned up in the atmosphere? Here we're introduced to our main character Shinichi, who is attacked by one of these parasites, but managed to isolate it down to his right arm. Shinichi thought this was all just a dream until the next day at school when his arm began acting on its own, using the internet on his phone under the desk without him knowing about it, groping women, and so on. Of course, Shinichi wasn't the only person who was infected by one of these parasites. We're gradually introduced to other characters who had become inhabited by these creatures with varying personalities and objectives. Typically, in a story like this, humans would be the star of the show, but I felt it was the parasites that received the most development. From their humble beginnings of being unable to survive on their own, they have to learn how to speak and how to adapt to human life. Parasites initially only have a will to survive, giving them a very limited and dry personality at the start, but because of their hunger for knowledge on this new planet that they live on, to learn is to survive, and they must integrate themselves. So because of this and because of their experiences on Earth, they actually grow and take on different personalities. Now, when I say the parasites were the most developed, not only is this a positive, but it's also a negative. As I previously stated, stories like this usually put humanity as the focal point, and Parasyte is no different. It's great that the parasites receive this development, but it also means that many of the humans were very shallow and one-dimensional. In fact, I would rather see this story told from the perspective of the parasites because they have the greater struggle to survive. Sure, with Shinichi as the main character and Migi on his right hand, we had a great dialogue between these two species because they contrasted each other so well. We also had a lot of great comedy because of that and a lot of good fights. They were trying to achieve greater things than simple survival, such as public office, or my favorite character who was trying to cope with and understand her pregnancy. We see these parasites struggling to understand what it means to be a human and also to fit in with human society, coexisting with them, but they have to struggle with their urges to actually eat all the people around them. By comparison, Shinichi's goal as a character was pretty basic. Simply survive, that's it. However, Shinichi's character underwent a very drastic change because of the incorporation of the parasite into his body, but I felt this was mostly artificial, giving him development with his athletics and also with his appearance as well. So it's mostly cosmetic with that, but we also had a little bit of a shallow internal struggle with him as he tried to come to terms with why he had become so indifferent to the suffering of others all of a sudden. And there were other poorly explained supernatural elements here that kind of came out of nowhere, such as characters who had both the ability to emit and track parasite brainwaves. This dynamic was poorly explained, and I felt that it was only used to add additional characters to the story and also additional dramatic elements. The manga was labeled as seinen, and because of this, the anime was also labeled as such, but since they actually toned down on a little bit of the violence, they toned down on how grotesque the parasites look, and toned down on a lot of the crude sex humor here, it really feels like it's just a shonen with a bit more blood. And even if you didn't remove these things, it still feels like it's a shonen with just a bit more blood. Remove the sex jokes, remove the blood and everything here, and what do you get? A 16-year-old boy who's trying to fight off aliens and save the world. Sounds a lot like a shonen, doesn't it? To its credit, there were a few supporting characters that get killed, and also his family gets mixed in from time to time, but I felt that these elements were sparse at best. This series features some beautiful fights that really got me excited for it. It really got me hyped up here, but it wasn't just because it looked great and it had a lot of violence here, but because Shinichi and Migi had to strategize mid-battle. We had one who would defend, one who would attack, and there were a lot of other strategies that they used. I like that they talked to each other mid-battle as well, strategizing in every single moment that they had. I also loved how they had all of this exposition about the nature of these parasites and how the mechanics were actually useful in combat, giving these parasites limits to a degree. However, there was one villain who decided to break all of these rules and just decide to stuff multiple parasites inside of his body, and we learn with Shinichi and Migi that where Migi is part of Shinichi's right hand, he can only exert himself for a few hours a day, then having to sleep for like half the day there. This character should have been very useful and very effective in short bursts, but then had to sleep for at least a day. Because there were so many parasites in his body, the amount of downtime should have been exponential. The visuals here were also enjoyable. The parasites themselves, they looked pretty grotesque, however, they looked a lot better in the manga. I have no complaints about the usage of color or the articulation of facial expressions here. The fight animations were smooth, and these parasites would flail their tentacles back and forth with blades so fast, and it really got me excited. The audio was very hit or miss for me. I enjoyed the background music more than I did the opening. I thought it was alright the first time I heard it, but then after 24 times of hearing it, I really didn't like it. I'm not a fan of autotune. As of right now, there is no English dub for Parasyte, and I do not have any complaints about the Japanese voice acting. My final score for Parasyte was a 7.5 out of 10, with an enjoyment level of an 8 out of 10. It introduced many interesting concepts, with some characters that interacted with each other very well. However, some characters were lacking in development. Overall, I recommend Parasyte. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section below, either the anime or the manga, either one. Let me know about that. Be sure to leave spoiler warnings. Thank you for watching. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.